Curious. Look at this simulation of a rushing river forming a whirlpool. The whirlpool has a distinct shape and a presence you can easily point to. But if you try to pull it out of the river and examine it on its own, you're left with nothing. It only exists in relationship to the flow around it. What we call things, objects, people, human institutions, operate in a similar way. They are temporary patterns in a larger, invisible field. You are a specific configuration of the exact same space that makes up the air you're breathing and the walls around you. But we have a habit of pulling the whirlpool out of the river. When we look at human failure, we treat the person as an isolated anomaly, separated from the current of the environment that shaped them. If a building collapses, we don't blame a single steel beam. We look at how the weight was distributed. Yet, when someone ends up in the justice system, we often abandon the logic of structural engineering and treat them as a defective, independent unit. To figure out why a human life goes off track, we have to look past the individual. We need to analyze the invisible structural forces that are holding that failure in place. This is atomic tensegrity. Shapes are held by continuous tension, not rigid connections. The nucleus and electron cloud maintain volume through opposing vectors pulling in and pushing out. Scaled out, what feels like solid matter is mostly empty space, held by this interconnected network. There is a rule in structural engineering that applies to everything that stands. The system that survives is the one that shares the weight. A load distributed across a network can absorb stress that would crush an individual point. When a structure relies on a single rigid point to carry what the whole system should be distributing, it becomes vulnerable. It holds the pressure until it snaps, bringing everything above it down. The principles of distributed tension that keep a copper roof standing or an atom intact also allow human societies to absorb stress. When the load is shared, the structure holds. Look at these isolated cells moving to form a synchronized cluster. In biology, cells survive by sharing the metabolic load and communicating through chemical signals. Humans require the most complex clustering of any species. Raising a child takes a massive distribution of structural weight, a network of family, friends, and neighbors, reflecting back to the child who they are and what they're capable of. When that community network is absent, the structural load concentrates on the isolated individual. That intense pressure bends their internal feedback mechanism, creating a crooked loop. By the time an action like a crime occurs, we are looking at the end of a long chain. The action is the visible symptom of an intent that was misaligned early on by trauma or an absence of honest signaling from the environment. Punishing that misaligned loop as a deliberate, isolated moral failure ignores the collapse of structural load that forced the bend to happen in the first place. If we apply an engineering lens to the American carceral system, a structural vulnerability becomes obvious. It relies entirely on rigid concentration, warehousing individuals in isolated points, instead of distributing the load across a network. You cannot punish a loop straight. Incarcerating a feedback mechanism into alignment fails because the system adds more distortion to an already bent signal. This is why the recidivism rate, the percentage of people who return to prison within 3 years, sits between 65 and 70. It doesn't keep a standing army looking for a reason to justify its existence. The carceral system lost its exit condition the moment punishment and incarceration were transformed into revenue-generating products. Fear became a product, and the system developed its own survival instinct. A structure that is incentivized to profit from a problem will not solve it. To keep its own infrastructure fed and functioning, it requires a continuous supply of human failure. Without an exit condition, this system operates like an autoimmune disease. It is a defense network that forgot how to stand down, attacking the host body it was built to protect. To repair the host, the first structural step is severing the financial incentives. We have to starve the system of the artificial, monetized load it uses to survive. The biological alternative to mass incarceration is returning to bottom-up clustering. We replace rigid state infrastructure with localized, honest human intervention, people working with each other to retrace the bends in the loop. When one person does internal work to restore a clean signal, that coherence ripples outward, realigning the broader community network one connection at a time. The solution to systemic human failure isn't a new invention. It is the application of the same distributed resilience found in biological cells and structural networks. When we stop concentrating the load and start sharing it, the system stops breaking.